So can I start now?
Please continue.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. So just sorry for the little bit delay. So as I told you, I'll be speaking about how to approach a patient with a bone and soft tissue sarcoma, and then just highlight some of the principles of limb salvage surgery. So just to go to some of the basics, what is a sarcoma? So all you are an oncosurgeon, so you are mostly treating with dealing with carcinomas, but I am a sarcoma surgeon. So what is a sarcoma? So sarcomas are the rare neoplasms which arise from mesenchymal tissue elements of the body. And so what are the mesenchymal tissues? Mostly it comprises of the soft tissues and bone. So any tumor which arises from the muscle, it's a leiomyosarcoma. A sarcoma or a tumor arising from fat, it's a liposarcoma. So likewise, a tumor arising from an osteoid part of the bone, it's an osteosarcoma. And a tumor arising from the cartilaginous part is a chondrosarcoma. So basically, it is a very heterogeneous group of tumors which arises from the mesenchymal tissues of the body, and that is known as a sarcoma. So, as I told you, there are hundreds and hundreds of nomenclature which is there in one etiology known as a sarcoma. So, as you can see in soft tissue sarcoma, there are a lot of things which comes under it, such as liposarcoma, annual sarcoma, leiomyosarcoma, and goes on. And bone sarcoma, basically there are osteosarcoma, Ewing sarcoma, and a chondrosarcoma. So it's somewhat some sort of confusing thing. But what is an orthopedic oncology? It's a branch of an orthopedic or a subspecialty of an of oncosurgery where we deal with all the tumors which arise from basically mesenchymal parts or an appendicular and axial skeleton. So we also deal with some of the benign tumors. So basically, what's the difference between a benign and a malignant tumor? You all must be knowing, but when we approach as being an orthopedic surgeon and then coming to an oncosurgery field, it's very difficult for us. So this is the basic slide, which all of you must knowing that what's the difference between a benign and a malignant tumor. So as you can see here, the benign tumor, it grows very slowly. It also expands, but as you can see, they all of them must be having a nice capsule or a covering around it, which won't allow them to spread rapidly. In contrast with these benign tumors, the malignant tumors won't have a good capsule around it. It will break the capsule and then it has a propensity to spread across the body or metastasis. So these are the two basic difference between a benign and malignant tumor, and we take help of this thing whenever we are treating a benign tumor or a malignant bone tumor. So coming to the etiology, there is not any specific etiology for any sarcomas. And as we all know, the basic thing that causes a tumor or a sarcoma is rearrangement of some genetic alteration, and it is same with these sarcomas. And in specific, an osteosarcoma is associated with that RB gene and P53 gene. And this is a picture which tells a lot of other genes which are associated with an etiology of other sarcomas. And again, same, lot of chromosomal alterations which we take help of in case of some of the confusing pathologies, the fish studies that we do, and these are the whole lot of genetic alteration or the molecular alterations which we typically see in some of the classical sarcoma cases. So the main thing now, I would like to share with you how to approach. So whenever you see a patient with a sarcoma, the two main things that you want to see is one is age and one is site. Why age and site? Because sarcomas have a very good predilection to ages. Means there are some of sarcomas which are common in younger ages, and there are some of the sarcomas which are common in older ages. So looking to some of the age criteria, you can narrow down your own differential diagnosis and be sure that what you are dealing with. Same goes with the site of the tumor. So there are also some of the tumors which are very site specific. So whenever you are again dealing with tumor and you see a tumor in say lower part of femur, upper part of tibia or a lower end of radius, you have your mind some of open to some of the etiologies. Means with age and site only you can narrow down your diagnosis. So as you can see, osteochondroma. So it's a type of a benign bony tumor, and as you can see, the peak age of this tumor is around 10 to 30 years. So it's more common before puberty. So if you are dealing with some of the tumor in younger age with a benign, if you think that's a benign tumor, osteochondroma may be one of your own diagnosis. Same goes for chondroblastoma. So these are the tumors which are present in younger ages. So if you go to sarcomas, so chondrosarcoma, it's a sarcoma of an older age. So as you can see, a primary chondrosarcoma will be most common in 50 to 80 years, means more than 50 years of age. Whereas osteosarcoma and an Ewing sarcoma, they are more common in younger age, adolescent. Osteosarcoma has a bimodal presentation, means it's the most common age is around 20 years, and then the second peak is around 40 years. So with the with only the site and age of the patient, you can narrow down your diagnosis and have some of the things in your mind. So after age and site, the next most common thing that you ask to your patient is how is the pain and what is the is there any swelling or not? And again in pain, you need to ask what is the type of the pain, nature of the pain. Is there any diurnal variation? So because there are some of the tumors which have diurnal variation. For example, in osteoma, patient will typically tell you that he has got lot of pain at night. Is there any aggravating or relieving factor? So again, in osteoma, patient will tell that pain typically resolves as soon as you take an aspirin. So you need to ask that what is the type of the pain, or what is there any diurnal variation, what are the aggravating factors, or what are the relieving factors. This helps you again in narrowing down your differential diagnosis. Next most important thing that your patient with a sarcoma will complain is a complaint of swelling. So you need to again ask whether the pain has preceded the swelling or the swelling has preceded the pain. Because what happens in bone tumor is patient will get pain only and only when the periosteum, means the covering of the bone, is irritated. So if there is a tumor in the bone where the bone is not expanded, obviously the periosteum will not be expanded, and then patient won't have any pain. As soon as the swelling is there, the pain will be there. So mostly in bone tumors, what happens is first there is swelling, then there is the irritation of the periosteum, and then patient will have pain. Whereas in a soft tissue sarcomas, pain will be a most common thing because of the irritation of the surrounding structures, and then swelling might come. So these are the two main again important things which you will need to ask to a patient in during history taking. Again, the duration of the pain, and as all of you know, patient with a malignant tumor will have a very short history. Means if you ask the patient what is the duration of the pain, he will tell that it's present since 3 or 4 months. Whereas a patient who has a benign bony tumor, say osteochondroma, he will say that pain is there since long, means more than 6 months. So duration of pain is also most important. Again, then there are some of the constitutional symptoms such as fever, loss of weight, anorexia. So these are the symptoms which are common in patients who have Ewing sarcoma. Because it's a marrow disease, these are the constitutional symptoms which will be present in a patient whom you suspect to be suffering from an Ewing sarcoma. So you need to ask these constitutional symptoms also. Now, going back to your MS days where you were taught to examination of a swelling. So this is also again most important. So after noting down the history, you have some of your differentials in your mind, and then you go to examine the swelling. So it's basically the same thing that you have learned, that whether it's mobile, what is the appearance of the swelling, are there any dilated veins, is there any fungation? What is the condition of distal pulsation? This is also very much important. Whether the consistency of the swelling is soft or firm. For example, if you are dealing with a tumor, lipomatous tumor, the consistency of the swelling will be very much soft. So you have your some of the things in your mind that what tumor you are dealing with, whether there is other swelling present in the body or not. So as you can see here, this is a patient having a tumor in proximal humerus or upper part of the arm. And as you can see, this is an aggressive tumor. So there always will be a neovascularization, and there will be presence of dilated veins. So if you see such patient, see such sort of fungation, then your mind will stick that yes, I am dealing with some of the malignant tumor. So as I told, then you need to check what is the condition of distal pulsation, because this is very important when your management part will come. Because any tumor which is rapidly progressing might involve the nearby neural or vascular structures, and that which might be hampering the distal flow, and which might be hampering thing to your limb salvage surgery. So always check for the distal pulsation. For example, if you are dealing with a tumor which is there in the lower part of the femur or an upper tibia, which is the most common case that you will get in your practical exam, always check distal pulsation. Mention that the distal anterior tibial or the posterior tibial pulsations are present or not. So as I told you, that you need to check whether there are other swellings also present in the body, because there are some of the tumors which are in multiplicity. For example, as I told you, osteochondroma. So there is a term known as multiple osteochondromas. So it's an hereditary disease where there will be lot of swelling present in all of the part of the body, because it's a tumor which arises from the cartilage, epiphyseal part. So you need to check whether there are swellings present in other part of the body or not. Other tumor is a neurofibromatosis, where there will be multiple swellings present in the body. So you need to check or ask specifically to the patient whether he has any other swelling in any other part of the body. So these are the things which will help you to just narrow down your differential. First, whether you are dealing with a benign tumor or a malignant tumor, and if a malignant tumor, then according to site and everything, just narrow down your diagnosis that what tumor you are dealing with. So after your history and physical examination is over, the next important thing is then you start investigating the patient. So obviously, in as the investigation protocol follows, first and primary investigations are your blood parameters. So you need to check your hemoglobin status. What is the general condition of the patient? There are some markers which are elevated in some of the tumors. For example, alkaline phosphatase. So alkaline phosphatase is a marker of a bony overgrowth or bony turnover. So in osteosarcoma, what happens is the body tries to produce newer bone, but that is an abnormal bone or a malignant osteoid. So in those patients, serum alkaline phosphatase level will be raised or high. Same goes in Ewing sarcoma. So there is a parameter known as LDH. So it will be elevated in patients who have Ewing sarcoma. So this is not a thumb rule, but in most of the cases, alkaline phosphatase is associated with prognosis with osteosarcoma, and an LDH prognostifies Ewing sarcoma. Then you need to check your bleeding parameters, because these will be very much important when you are dealing with your biopsies, because you know if there are alterations in bleeding time or clotting time, then it will be very difficult to do any procedure. So after doing your blood investigation, for an orthopedic oncologist or oncosurgeon who deals with a bone tumor, the most important investigation what I feel is an X-ray. So whenever you get done an X-ray, there are 3 or 4 basic things that you need to know. And I think this is a thing also that you are asked in your exam, that you will just be put up on an X-ray and just asked to tell what is the diagnosis. So in this thing, you need to see these 5 points. So what are those 5 points? As it has been highlighted. First is what is the border of the lesion. Second is what type of bone destruction is there. Third is what is the type of periosteal reaction, whether periosteal reaction is present or absent. What is the matrix or what is the content of the lesion. And fifth is there any associated soft tissue swelling or not. So I will just request all of you to just take a snapshot of this thing, because this is the thing that you need to see in each and every X-ray. So if you remember these 5 points, you will be able to properly describe an X-ray. So we'll just see all of these things one by one with the proper examples. So border of the lesion. So as you can see on top left of the picture, there is a lesion in upper part of the tibia. But as you can see, a nice boundary we can draw with a pencil. So if a lesion has a well-defined border, so we call it as zone of transition. So what is zone of transition? Means if you can draw a clear-cut line between a abnormal lesion and the normal part of the bone, then that is known as a narrow zone of transition. Means you can clearly draw a line between normal and abnormal area, and this signifies that the lesion is benign. So if you go to again middle part of the picture, you are not able to clearly define what is normal and abnormal. And again on the extreme right, it's absolutely impossible to draw where the normal bone ends or where the abnormal bone ends. So there the zone of transition is wide, and on the left side the zone of transition is narrow. So if the zone of transition is narrow, the lesion is mostly benign. And if the zone of transition is wide, the lesion is malignant. So this is most important, zone of transition. Then what if there is any bone destruction? What is the type of bone destruction? So again, on the extreme left, there is a geographic, means it's a clear-cut destruction. It's a same type of destruction. Whereas on the extreme right, there is a moth-eaten or a permeative, means there is some area of lytic, whereas there are some sclerotic areas. So it's known as moth-eaten or a permeative bone destruction, which is a sign of an aggressive bone tumor or a malignant bone tumor. Then the most important thing is periosteal reaction. So what is a periosteal reaction? So whenever there is any abnormality in the bone, the body tries to protect that abnormality by throwing some more bone on the outer surface of the bone, and that is known as a periosteal reaction. So understand that periosteal reaction is present also in benign bone tumors also, and also in malignant bone tumors. But the pattern of periosteal reaction which will be present in benign tumor and malignant tumor will be different. So this is most important. So as you can see, as soon as the periosteum gets lifted off from the surface of the bone, there will be a pseudo triangular formation, and this is what is known as a Codman's triangle. So in exam, you are many a time asked that shows the Codman's triangle. So basically, it's a triangle which is formed by the border of the bone and that of the elevated periosteum. So this is known as a Codman's triangle. So again, as I told you, or the periosteal reaction or Codman's triangle, it's present in benign tumor also and in malignant tumor. But the pattern of this periosteal reaction will be different. So what is the difference? So as I can show you here, on the left side, there is also, as you can see in the X-ray, there is a periosteal reaction. You can see some triangular formation, the solid part. And on the right side also, there is a periosteal reaction. But what's the difference is, on the left side, the periosteal reaction is solid or it's uninterrupted. Whereas on the right side, the periosteal reaction is interrupted. So why this happens? So because in benign tumors, as soon as the periosteal reaction or the periosteum is lifted, the body will again throw some new normal bone beneath that periosteum. And because the tumor is slow growing, that new bone which is thrown up will be calcified very fastly. And so the periosteal reaction will be thick and it will be uninterrupted. It will be very solid type of periosteal reaction. Conversely, in malignant tumors, what happens is, as soon as the periosteum is lifted, again the body will throw some new bone against that thing. But because the lesion is very fast growing, the bone whatever is formed, it will be rapidly destroyed, and that will not cause a solid reaction. So whatever periosteal reaction will be there will be uninterrupted. It will be in form of a layers. So what is known as a layered periosteal reaction? It's known as an onion skin or a perpendicular periosteal reaction, or known as a sun ray appearance. So sun ray appearance and a lamellated or an onion skin type of periosteal reaction, it suggests you of a malignant bone tumor. Then comes the matrix. So matrix means what is the content of the lesion, means what is there inside the lesion. So basically there are osteoblastic matrix and a chondroblastic matrix. Means what is an osteoblastic matrix? It's a matrix in which there will be new osteoid formation inside the tumor. So how it looks like is it will be looking like a fluffy cotton wool. Means you will see that if a cotton ball of a cotton is just placed inside a bone, you will feel like that thing, and that is known as an osteoblastic matrix. Whereas in case of an chondroid matrix, as you can see, there will be a stippled, means a punctate, just like a popcorn calcification. So, osteoblastic matrix is suggestive of an osteosarcoma, and a chondroblastic matrix is suggestive of an chondroid tumor. Again, osteoblastic matrix, fluffy cotton wool like dense, very dense calcification, and a chondroid means punctate, a popcorn type of calcification. So again, this is a very good slide. As I told you in my previous slide also, there are some of the tumors which have a very good predilection to some of the sites. So if you can see to the right of the your slide, there are lesions which are more common in center of the bone, and there are some of the tumors which are eccentric, means off center. So which are the lesions which are present in the center? For example, Ewing sarcoma or chondrosarcoma. So these are the sarcomas which are more common on center of the bone, whereas a benign tumor such as a giant cell tumor or a non-ossifying fibroma, it is more common eccentrically, means they are more off center. So again, a bone is divided into three parts. So moving on to the left side of your screen, a bone is divided into three parts. And what are those three parts? First is epiphysis, which is the terminal part of the bone. Then comes the metaphysis, which is just adjacent to the epiphysis, and the center part of the bone, what is known as the diaphyseal part. So there are some tumors which are site specific. For example, a GCT will be most commonly an epiphyseal lesion. A chondroblastoma, it is most commonly seen in epiphysis of a patient, whereas osteosarcoma most commonly seen in metaphysis, and traditionally taught an Ewing sarcoma is also present in metaphyseal diaphyseal. So there are some of the tumors which are site specific. It's not a thumb rule. For example, an osteosarcoma can be a diaphyseal or an metaphyseal and or an epiphyseal, and same goes with Ewing sarcoma. But there are some of the tumors which are more site specific, so, such as a chondroblastoma. Next comes is whether there is any soft tissue involvement present or absent. So as I told you in my some of the first slide, that in benign tumor what happens is that tumor grows, but there will be some sort of a pseudo capsule which will be present on the surface of the bone. So the benign tumor won't break that pseudo capsule and have a frank soft tissue extension. Whereas in case of a malignant tumor, the tumor will break that capsule and there will be a frank soft tissue involvement. So a soft tissue involvement is also present in benign tumor as well as a malignant tumor. But the pattern of involvement of soft tissue will be different in malignant tumor and a benign tumor. So these are the 5 things that you need to see whenever you are dealing with an X-ray. If you recapitulate all those things in an X-ray, then you are pretty sure that what you are dealing with, whether it's a malignant tumor or a benign tumor. And in malignant tumor, what can be those things? So again, to summarize it in one slide, so if a lesion is benign, it will have a well-defined sclerotic border. There will be lack of soft tissue mass. A periosteal reaction, if present, will be a solid type of periosteal reaction. There will be a geographic bone destruction. Whereas in case of a malignant lesion, there will be an interrupted periosteal reaction with a nice Codman's triangle, a moth-eaten or a permeative type of a bone destruction, a frank soft tissue mass, and most important thing, border, means zone of transition, that will be very much wide. So a typical X-ray, if you want to describe, I can tell that it's an X-ray of a immature or a mature skeleton which has a wide zone of transition with a periosteal reaction with a soft tissue mass, most probably suggestive of a malignant bone tumor. So in exams, you are always shown an X-ray of an osteosarcoma. So you can say like that it is an X-ray of an immature skeleton showing a tumor in metaepiphyseal part of the bone with a wide zone of transition with a soft tissue mass and a interrupted periosteal reaction, most probably suggestive of a malignant lesion. So this is how you have to describe an X-ray. So I think that's fine. Again, if you want me to repeat, you ask me, I will just repeat it either verbally or note down in the chat box. So then after an X-ray is done, there are some of the more investigation. Most important investigation is MRI, but CT scan, you are all fan of CT scans. So I have just kept a CT scan ahead of an MRI. CT scan has got very much limited use in bone and soft tissue tumors. So what are those 4 or 5 indications? If you think that the tumor that you are dealing with is an intraosseous, means if the tumor is on the border of the bone, then you can order an CT scan. If you want to know what is the type of ossification, then you can order a CT scan. CT scan will help you in your interventional procedure. For example, in doing a CT carotid biopsy, in pre-op planning and staging. Most common site of metastasis for bone tumors is lung and second is bone. So in staging of bone tumors, what we do is we do a CT scan of thorax and a bone scan. So CT scan is helpful in knowing the status of lung mets. So these are the some of the images. As you can see on the right, there is a tumor which is present in the cortex of the bone, and as you can see, a CT scan classically demonstrates that thing, and this is the classical sign of a benign tumor known as osteoid osteoma. So the arrow which is pointing, it depicts the nidus of the tumor, nidus of an osteoid osteoma. So in osteoid osteoma, CT scan is investigation of choice. As you can see here on CT scan, you can nicely see the punctate calcification which are present. In doing a CT carotid biopsy, you need the help of a CT scan, and then in doing some of the definitive procedures. For example, in a diagnosed case of an osteoid osteoma, the treatment of choice is radiofrequency ablation. And so what we do is we take the patient under CT scan, locate the nidus. So nidus is that small radiolucent part which you see, enter our radio frequency probe into that nidus and then connect that probe with a RF ablation generator and then ablate it. So it's a very less time consuming procedure and it has got very good result. It's a percutaneous procedure. And you can see it helps us in knowing the status of lung also. And so after it, MRI. So as it's written over here, MR imaging is a very powerful tool in detection, diagnosis, staging, and follow-up of bone tumors. So if you tell me what is one of the investigation of choice for bone tumor, and surely MRI is that investigation which will always needed whenever you are dealing with a bone or a soft tissue tumor. So why MRI and not CT scan? Because MRI has got some specific advantages. So what are those advantages? And as you can see, a bone tumor, whenever you are planning a surgery, as you know, you need to take some margin. You need to see what is the marrow involvement. So you will not be able to see marrow involvement with CT scan. Whereas an MRI will definitely tell you what is the marrow involvement. Also, it will help us to know what are the soft tissue which has been involved and what are the relationship of a vascular bundle. As you can see on the right side of the tumor, it's an axial cut section of a patient with a tumor in the lower part of the femur. And as you can see, it's involved the surrounding muscles, but still the popliteal or the femoral vascular bundle is not involved. So it's a case of a limb salvage surgery. So MRI helps us to know the soft tissue component, the marrow component, and also to know what are the necrotic parts. So in some cases, you need to avoid those necrotic parts in your biopsy. So it also helps us in targeting our biopsy site. Characteristic of lesion. So here, as you can see, there is a tumor in the lower part of the tibia, and as you can see, there are multiple fluid levels. So with an MRI of such sort, you are quite sure that you are dealing with an cystic lesion, most probably an aneurysmal bone cyst or a telangiectatic osteosarcoma. So with the help of an MRI, you also get to know what is the matrix or what is the content of the lesion, and in some of the cases it might be a diagnostic thing. So then comes bone scan. So as I told you, in staging modality of bone tumors, we do a CT scan of thorax, and second is bone scan. So why bone scan? Because as I told you, the second most common site of metastasis in bone tumor is bones. So we routinely do a bone scan, and what? It's a MDP bone scan. And as you can see, we can definitely get to know what are the uptake, high area of uptake. But mind you, in fact, if there is a infection in the bone, that part also will give a high uptake. So bone scan is not specific. Means if there is an uptake in the bone, it's not always sure that there is a tumor. That can be any other etiology. So bone scan has to be supplemented or need to be used in conjunction with all other modalities. Next investigation is a PET-CT. So PET-CT we routinely do not use in bone or soft tissue tumors. There are very specific roles where we use PET-CT, and recently we are using PET-CT in staging cases of suspected case or a diagnosed case of an Ewing sarcoma. Because as you know, Ewing sarcoma is a marrow disease. So in case of Ewing sarcoma, in addition to CT thorax and bone scan, we need to do a bone marrow biopsy because it's a marrow disease. So if you want to avoid this bone marrow biopsy altogether, then you can get done a PET-CT scan in case of Ewing sarcoma. But usually we do not prefer in osteosarcoma. So again, in osteosarcoma, CT thorax and a bone scan, and in Ewing sarcoma, either a PET-CT or CT thorax, bone scan, and a bone marrow biopsy. And as you can see, with the help of these SUV values, you get to know whether you are dealing with a benign tumor or a malignant tumor. For example, in chondroid cases, what happens is on biopsy, sometimes it becomes very much difficult to tell whether you are dealing with a atypical cartilaginous, means a benign, or a chondrosarcoma. So in such cases, you can take help of these SUV values. For example, if your SU values is less than 2, you can be pretty sure that it's a benign tumor. And then after your all investigative modalities are over, the most important investigation, as you all know, is biopsy. Your whole decision regarding a limb salvage or a proper treatment can go either on the right decision or wrong decision. It all depends upon how you plan your biopsy. So remember, biopsy is not an easy task. It is the most important thing of a bone tumor. So biopsy of bone lesion should be performed as a final. Remember, this is also most important thing. You just get an X-ray, you feel that it's an osteosarcoma. You cannot rush in again directly from an X-ray to a biopsy. It should always be a stepwise procedure. Means after an X-ray, an MRI should be done, and then a biopsy should be done. So it should be performed as a final diagnostic step after completion of all appropriate imaging. Do not rush into a poorly planned biopsy. So again, suspicious if you feel that there is an abnormal bone lesion, do a good history, clinical examination, radiography, investigative modalities such as blood tests, chest X-rays, MR scan, and then you plan your biopsy. Also, there are certain do not touch lesions. Means you need not do a biopsy in each and every suspected cases. There are some of the tumors where you need not do a biopsy. And what are those? For example, as you can see in the left side, it's an osteochondroma, and on the right side, it's an osteoma. So these are the tumors which are quite well known only on your MR or an X-ray. So just by an X-ray or MR, you get to know what tumor you are dealing with. And so in such cases, you need not do a biopsy. But remember again, in 99% of your cases, you will need to do a biopsy. So for primary tumors, biopsy at the same center as the definitive treatment is advisable. So this is the dictum that if you are going to operate the patient, then only you should do the biopsy. For example, if you know that you are not going to deal with or you are not going to do the final surgery, then it's not a good point to do a biopsy. Rather, it's better to either coordinate with your colleague radiologist and then do a biopsy. You cannot rush in just to do a biopsy and then refer the case or just wash off your hands, because it's most important thing. So what we prefer is biopsy should be done at same center where the definitive treatment has to be done. And the most important again thing is the approach. Where to do, what site to do the biopsy. The biopsy approach should be carefully planned according to the oncological principles to prevent local recurrence. Why? Because at the time of your final surgery, you will definitely like to ellipse that biopsy tract and remove that tract along with the main specimen. And why so? Because there are studies which show that there are tumor cells which are present in that biopsy tract. So if you leave that biopsy tract, you are very much prone to have a local recurrence. So it should be carefully planned according to the line of incision of your final surgery. So what are those sites? So this is a very nice picture freely available on net. So if on depend so where to do that biopsy depending upon the site of the bone tumor. So for example, if you have a patient with a tumor in the lower femur or distal femur, then you have to do a biopsy either from anterolateral or from anteromedial. Never to do biopsy from anterior side, means not to do biopsy from direct anterior side. Why? Because you need to preserve the rectus femoris muscle which is present anteriorly. If you are able to preserve that muscle, then only you will be able to do a good limb salvage surgery and give a good function to that limb. So it's very important to plan or to do the site of the biopsy. So again, if you are have a patient with a tumor in lower femur, either do a anteromedial or an anterolateral. Never an anterior biopsy. Never anteriorly. Okay. So same goes again with upper tibia lesion. So you can do a biopsy either from anteromedial or an anterolateral. Never anteriorly or through the patellar tendon. Because again, as I told you, you need to preserve the patellar tendon and the quadriceps tendon to give a good function whenever you are contemplating a limb salvage surgery. In proximal humeral, you need to do a biopsy through a deltoid muscle and not through the deltopectoral. You do not want to contaminate your intermuscular area. You want to contaminate only one muscle, and that's intramuscular. So in upper humerus cases, you need to do biopsy through anterior part of the deltoid muscle. So these are some of the cases where the biopsy was very much poorly planned and it contemplated our limb salvage surgery. In the top left corner, you can see a transverse incision. And you know, if you want to take these transverse biopsy along with your specimen, there will be a lot of morbidity. You might need a free flap or don't know what you need to do. So never to do a transverse incision biopsy. Picture on the second right corner is you can see the small dot with the pen which is marked up. So that was the site of the biopsy which was done through the patellar tendon. So now I need to sacrifice all of the patellar tendon, and then the function of the limb will be very much poor. The third picture is showing the drain site. So you cannot do an open biopsy in now present area. We always prefer a needle biopsy. But in case if you want to do an open biopsy and put a drain, the drain side should be along the incision. It cannot be such far because you need to take that drain side also along with the specimen. So in such cases, it's very difficult to take all of this area in your specimen. It might contemplate a limb salvage or it might need a very major surgery. So again, moving on to the biopsy method. So FNAC, I have put a big cross because FNAC has got absolutely very much limited role in case of bone and soft tissue sarcoma. Why so? Because as I told you earlier, these are a very heterogeneous type of tumor. In most of the cases, you will be needing to do an IHC or a further studies, which is very much not possible with the help of an FNAC, and you will not be able to see the structure of the tumor with FNAC. So in bone and soft tissue tumor, FNAC is strongly contraindicated. Only very specific situations we can do an FNAC. But in most of the cases, you need to do a core needle biopsy. So again, how to do that biopsy? Either to do a percutaneous needle biopsy or an open biopsy. And all of you know the advantages of a percutaneous biopsy. So in present era, in 98 to 99% of cases, we do a percutaneous or a needle biopsy. And as you know, what are the advantages? It's the day care procedure, a minimal contamination, and it's very much easier to do. So always try to do a percutaneous biopsy. There are all specific cases where you need to do an open biopsy. So how to do a needle biopsy? As you can see, and as you must all be knowing that a needle biopsy is performed with the help of a bone biopsy needle, commonly known as a Jamshedi needle. So this is a classical picture of a Jamshedi needle, which has a trocar and a tapered tip. So why a tapered tip? Because it helps to help that bone core which is there to stuck into that core. So with the help of a coaxial passage, if you enter your needle into the bone, your bone core will get set that needle, and this is such type of core which you will get at the end of a bone biopsy procedure. So after you have done your biopsy and sent that sample to the pathologist, your pathologist will tell you that whether you are dealing with a benign tumor or a malignant tumor. So now I am shifting my focus from approach to patient to some of the principles of management of a bone tumor case. So if you know that now your pathologist has told us that you are dealing with a benign bone tumor. So what are the principles of treating a benign bone tumor? In most of the benign bone tumor, what we do is an extended curettage. So I will not go in detail, but what curettage is we expose the cavity in a good manner, all 360-degree, then use a burr, such type of burr, and with the help of a very high rotation per minute, for approximately 60,000 rotation of per minute, we use this burr and then burr that cavity. And after that burring, the cavity which is left, it is filled up with either a bone graft, cement, or if any fixation device such as plating needed or not. So this is how we approach a benign bone tumor. But there are some cases where, for example, this is a case of a distal radius giant cell tumor, where you won't be able to do a curettage because, as you can see, there is no wall or no bone left against which you can curate. So in such cases, you need to excise that part. So what we did was we resected lower part of the radius and shifted ulna and did a wrist arthrodesis. So now moving on again, now if your pathologist tells that no, now you are dealing with some sort of a malignant bone tumor, for example, an osteosarcoma. So now how to approach it? So as you all know, after you get to know that you are dealing with a malignant bone tumor, you need to stage it. So what are the staging protocols? So again, as I have told you earlier, in osteosarcoma, CT thorax and a bone scan, or in case of chondrosarcoma also, what or XYZ bone sarcoma, CT thorax and bone scan needs to be done. In case of Ewing sarcoma, you need to do a PET CT because it's a marrow disease. So after your staging workup is done, in most of the cases of bone sarcoma, you need to give neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So as you all know, there are three modalities to treat a tumor. First is chemotherapy, second is radiotherapy, and third is surgery. So in most of the cases of bone tumors, you need to give pre-op chemotherapy or neoadjuvant chemotherapy, except in some of the cases such as chondrosarcoma. So osteosarcoma and Ewing sarcoma are chemosensitive tumors. So in those cases, we give pre-op chemotherapy on almost all cases. So after giving your chemotherapy, then comes the surgical part. So if you are dealing with an osteosarcoma, you proceed with surgery, or if you are dealing with an Ewing sarcoma, so after giving your neoadjuvant chemotherapy, you have an option of either to do a surgery or to give radiotherapy. But always, if the lesion is resectable, surgery has to be preferred. So most of the cases, what your treatment chart will be: first you stage the disease, as I told you, then you give pre-op chemotherapy, then do a good oncological surgery, and then give adjuvant chemotherapy or radiotherapy depending upon the case with which you are dealing with. So moving on to surgery. So always surgery which has to be done in always you have to follow the oncological principles. And oncological principles means it revolves around two things. First is margin and second is function. So if both of them can be balanced, then only a limb salvage surgery can be done. So many of times you will be asked that what is the indication of a limb salvage surgery. So I will just tell you in one line that what is the indication of limb salvage surgery. So if after doing a good oncological resection with good margin, you are left with a limb which will be able to give a good function, then that is the case to do a limb salvage surgery. Fine. So understand. So this is the indication of doing a limb salvage. So what that if there is a tumor anywhere, you are able to take it with a good margin, and after taking that tumor off, you are left with good amount of muscle bulk or good amount of neurovascular structure, which will be able to give a good function to that limb. You will be able to properly reconstruct. Then only that patient is a candidate for a limb salvage surgery. So, for example, if you have a good margin, you remove all of the tumor with good margin. But after that, you have got no muscles to give a good function to that limb. Then there is no point in doing a limb salvage. So that is a contraindication to limb salvage. So what are the contraindications to limb salvage surgery? A poorly placed biopsy. So as I told you, in most of the cases, we need to ellipse the biopsy tract along with the main specimen. So if there is a patient in which the biopsy tract is a very odd area where you will not be able to take that thing, or a poorly performed open biopsy which has contaminated the whole area, so that's a contraindication to do a limb salvage surgery. Involvement of a major neurovascular structure. So understand, major neurovascular. For example, if your main femoral artery is involved, femoral vein is involved, a bone is involved, then it's a slight contraindication. Remember, you can do a vascular reconstruction, but it's a relative contraindication to do a limb salvage surgery. Pertaining to neural structures, if you feel that your some of the minor nerves need to be resected, then that's not a contraindication. You can do a limb salvage surgery. Next is loss of adequate motors. So as I told you, if you feel that you need to exercise quadriceps muscles, for example, in lower limb, then whatever, if you do a prostate reconstruction, you will not be able to give a good amount of knee joint function. So that's a relative contraindication to a limb salvage surgery. If there's an extensive infection, you cannot do a good reconstruction. Again, there is a contraindication. And last is pathological fracture. So it's a relative contraindication. Why? Because whenever there's a fracture through the tumor, the whole surrounding area will get contaminated. But if you give a good chemotherapy and that fracture heals, then you can attempt a limb salvage surgery. But if that fracture fails to heal even after giving chemotherapy, then you cannot do a limb salvage surgery. So then now moving on to the concept of margins. So always you are asked that what is a good margin in bone and soft tissue tumor. So traditionally, Anne King, a father of musculoskeletal cancer surgery, he gave us four types of margin: intralesional, marginal, wide, and radical. So as all of you know, you cannot do a intralesional or a marginal excision in a sarcoma case. So what previously thought was they used to do a radical excision, means a compartmental, means you remove whole compartment. But then as studies came forward, the idea of radical excision went away, and then now what we follow is we do a wide excision. So what is wide excision? You get a good margin away from the tumor and then remove the tumor. That is known as a wide excision. So how much wide do we need to go? That also has changed in recent times. So previously we used to tell that a quantitative method means a 2 centimeter margin we used to follow in case of bone tumor or soft tissue sarcoma cases. But recent studies have changed the concept of quantitative margin to a qualitative margin. So this was a very good paper from Kawaguchi, which completely changed our mind. And what he suggested is we need to follow a qualitative margin. So what is a qualitative margin? Means as you can see, if there's a tumor in the femur, which is highlighted in the red part, and if you take your margin through the fat area, so the fat beside that tumor also is a barrier to the spread of the tumor. So there are thick barrier and thin barrier. The cartilage which is present, it's a very thick barrier. So if a tumor is next sitting to the cartilage and you take that cartilage as a margin, it is equivalent to 5 centimeter of margin. For example, if a soft tissue tumor is there, which is just sitting on the periosteum of the bone, and you take periosteum as a margin, then that periosteum, that quality of periosteum is equivalent to 5 centimeter of margin. So you need not take the part of the bone for a margin. If the tumor which is just touching the periosteum, it is sufficient to take periosteum as a margin, and that is most important thing. So the concept of quantitative margin has changed to a qualitative margin. Remember this. So after getting the concepts of margin fine, I will just try to highlight what are the type of resections what we do in bone tumors. So after after a sarcoma excision, there is an hemicortical defect. Either there's an intercalary defect. So what is an intercalary? Means you remove the center part of the bone. The proximal and the distal joint are not affected. So in such cases, you can do an intercalary. Means a center part of the bone is removed. So that is known as an intercalary resection. Next is joint involving. Means most common thing is tumor which is present in the lower part of the femur or an upper tibia. You need to sacrifice that part. So it's an osteoarticular resection. So after a resection, there are various reconstructive techniques. So I will just again highlight what are the various reconstructive techniques that we follow after a limb salvage surgery. So basically, there are two reconstruction techniques that you can apply after a limb salvage surgery. First is biological technique, and second is non-biological. So what is biological? Means after doing a resection, if you do a reconstruction which is almost similar to the normal biology of the patient. So what is normal biology? So if you replace that part of bone with an allograft or an autograft, means with a material which is most similar to the normal bone. So if you do reconstruction with that part, that is known as a biological reconstruction. Whereas if you do a reconstruction with a prosthesis, so it's a non-biological reconstruction. Both of them have got their advantage and disadvantage. If you do a reconstruction with the biological part, so that is most competent to a normal part. So on in the long run, these have these reconstruction have got very good results. Whereas in case of non-biological, so if you use a prosthesis, you will be able to get good function rapidly, but a long-term complications will be somewhat more than biological reconstruction. So it is not that you need to always do a biological. It has to be a case-based decision where to use a biological reconstruction or to use a non-biological reconstruction. So an example of a biological reconstruction is an allograft. So as you can see here, there was a tumor in the middle part of the femur. We removed that tumor, then we used this allograft, kept it in the defect and did a plating. So this is known as a biological reconstruction. But then these bones need to get united at both the ends. Then only your good results will come. Again, this is a type of an osteoarticular allograft where a tumor in the distal part of the femur was removed and an allograft, frozen allograft from another patient was used to reconstruct the defect. So this is type of a biological reconstruction. Next main biological reconstruction, what we use is patient's own bone. The tumor bearing bone is removed from the body. It is deactivated with a variety of techniques such as mentioned here, ECRT means we give a high dose radiation, 60 kg of radiation in 20 minutes. So this is one of the technique to deactivate that tumor. So one is ECRT, second is liquid nitrogen, third is pasteurization, and fourth is autoclaving. But what we follow and what we routinely do is ECRT and liquid nitrogen. So a representative case, as you can see, there's a tumor in the middle part of the tibia where a proximal joint is not involved. So here what we can do is we can remove that middle part of the bone, as you can see, then that part of the bone is removed of all the extraosseous disease and the only bone is left. All the tumorous part is removed and then only bone is left, which is wrapped in vancomycin soaked mops, and then this part is sent to intraoperatively, this part is sent to radiation where a high dose 60 K of radiation is given for 20 minutes, and after that that bone is again back to the operative field, and then again it is fixed to the its own area where it was removed with the help of a plates or whatever we need to take, and then this is the final picture. So again, this bone needs to get united at its proximal and distal part, but once it's united, it gives very good function. So this is one of the techniques to do a reconstruction. So next is what all of you are always asked in exam is prosthesis. So mega prosthesis. So what is a mega prosthesis? So these are a type of a prosthesis or which is known as tumor prosthesis, which we used in oncological reconstruction. So typically in previous years, what we used to do is a customized prosthesis. Means if you remove a if you plan that you are going to remove a 4 centimeter of bone, you need to give order at least 1 or 1.5 months prior to the surgery, and then your manufacturer will provide exactly that prosthesis which you need to fit it during the surgery. So now during 1 month, if the tumor has increased and instead of 4 centimeter you need to resect 5 centimeter, so what happened is you were in a very difficult situation. You only had one prosthesis at that time. Your manufacturer had provided only one prosthesis, so it was very difficult for us to manage these things. So then there came the concept of a modular prosthesis. So again, what is a custom made prosthesis? It is a prosthesis which is made for a specific defect. So that is known as a customized thing. Whereas what is a modular prosthesis? A modular prosthesis which will give you freedom to use two or three different type of prosthesis. So what are the components of a modular prosthesis? As you can see on the right side, it has an intramedullary stem, it has a resection piece, it has a condylar piece, and it has a articulating piece. So depending upon the type of resection, you can adjust your size of the prosthesis intraoperatively. So you have a lot of freedom to do a reconstruction. So these are known as modular mega prosthesis. And depending upon the site, there are various types of prosthesis available. So this is a classical case of a distal femur osteosarcoma where after resection, a distal femur mega prosthesis was used. Again, it's a case of an upper tibia osteosarcoma where after resection, a modular prosthesis was kept. In case of upper tibia prosthesis, we always do a gastrocnemius flap because the tibia is a very subcutaneous bone. So if you do a prosthesis in such area, there are very high chance of infection. So to prevent it and to give a good muscular cover, we do a gastrocnemius flap. So this is again a case of a proximal humerus or an upper humerus sarcoma, where after resection we had kept a proximal humerus megaprosthesis. So proximal humerus is such an area where if you remove that part, all of your rotator cuff muscles, means the muscles which are helpful in doing abduction of the arm, has to be removed. So after doing an proximal humerus resection, your shoulder function will go, but your elbow and hand function will be there. So you will be able to give a good functional hand to that patient, barring the function of the shoulder joint. Again, this is a case of an proximal femur sarcoma. So there are different types of prostheses available according to the site which you need to resect. Even a total femur resection is possible because now we have got such type of prostheses available. This is an example of a total humerus resection. So what I want to tell you is, okay, these are the modular megaprostheses which you can use depending upon the site where you have to do a resection. Such type of now pelvic prostheses are also available, where after doing a hemipelvectomy, you can do reconstruction with such type of prosthesis. But instead of doing a prosthesis, only a mesh plasty is more than sufficient. I will not be able to go in detail of that, but a mesh plasty can also be done. So what are the advances in megaprosthesis? So what you saw or what I showed are the types of a routine modular megaprosthesis. But now, for example, if you have to deal with a pediatric patient who has a sarcoma, then you cannot use such type of normal megaprosthesis because the height of that pediatric patient is going to grow as he grows. So in such cases, what we now routinely apply is known as an expandable prosthesis. So what's an expandable prosthesis? In expandable prosthesis, there will be a motor inside that prosthesis which will elongate after doing surgery. What we do is, after doing surgery, say approximately 3 to 4 months, as you can see here, the patient is there and that's a round black thing. That's an external device. So we just ask the patient to keep his or her foot into that machine and turn on the machine, which will elongate that prosthesis. So this is known as an expandable prosthesis, and this can be done without putting any incision into the patient's body. So these are known as an non-invasive, means without doing any intervention, you can expand the prosthesis at a later date. So these are known as non-invasive expandable prosthesis. But now we also have a minimal invasive prosthesis where if you want to elongate the prosthesis, you just need to put a small incision, and as you can see in this video, you just need to turn off that screw and then your prosthesis will expand. So why such prosthesis? Because these non-invasive prostheses are very much costly, whereas such sort of minimally invasive prostheses are little bit less costlier. So you can use such type of minimally invasive expandable prosthesis wherever you want to use it in case of pediatric patients. There are some areas where you need not do a reconstruction. So what are those areas? For example, a proximal radius sarcoma or a scapular sarcoma. Now scapular prostheses are also available, but traditionally a scapular sarcoma can be resected without doing any major reconstruction. I will just highlight you some 3 or 4 slides of what are the advances. So as I told you, liquid nitrogen it can be used, and one of the modalities is pedicle freezing. So what we do in pedicle freezing is, for example, this is a tumor in the proximal humerus. We dissect the proximal part of the humerus. Note, the tumor is again intact with the body. It's not totally removed from the body. Only one end of the bone is detained, which has the tumor, and that this tumor bearing bone is dipped into a container which is filled with liquid nitrogen, and then again we fit it back to its original place with the help of a prosthesis. So advantage here is we have not removed the tumor from the bone, so we have not put in any extra cut into the bone. So rehabilitation of such patients is very much quicker or faster than routine patients. Again, 3D printing is in use. You all must be using it, and we also use it in orthopedic oncology. And this is a case of a patient with a distal femur sarcoma, where you can see we have planned with 3D images, and we can nicely see where the tumor was, and then do a good planning, prepare a 3D model pre-operatively, so we can see what type of margin we can get at the time of resection. So 3D printing is also useful in orthopedic oncology. And last but not the least is use of a customized zig. So what is a zig? So as you can see here, that's a tumor in the lower part of the femur which has been circled off. So now if you want to remove the tumor, traditionally what would have happened is you need to remove whole distal part of the femur and put in a prosthesis. But now in such cases, you can remove this tumor with good margin and save the knee joint of the femur. So how you can do it? This is the case where we prepared a customized zig. As you can see, this is the zig which can be fitted off intraoperatively. As you can see, the left side was pre-operative planning, and on the middle part now, that's the intraoperative photo where the zig was kept and that tumor part was removed. And as you can see here, the tumor was removed with good margin, and the knee joint of the patient was also saved. So these are some of the recent techniques, or what you can say advancements that we use in now in orthopedic oncology, and you should all know that these are the things which are in place in such cases. So I think I have spoken a lot and time is also running away. So these are the things that I wanted to tell you: how to approach to a patient, how to plan your surgery, and always follow your oncological principles. So last slide, just the take home message is whenever you are dealing with a patient, you need to know whether you are dealing with a benign or a malignant lesion. Do a proper biopsy, follow the principles of biopsy, always do a teamwork. Means whenever you are in doubt, you can just ask your colleague, your pathologist, what are you dealing with, and it helps in your treatment protocol. And last but not the least is always follow the principles of oncology. Thank you.
Jaimin, thank you very much. Superb talk. That shows the vast experience. Actually,
Yes,
vast experience you have and the collections you have. Superb. I really loved it, especially the way you explained with the deltoid photo. How to violate one compartment, which can be a part of resection, and not go in the other area and contaminate intermuscular spaces. And the way you approach the type of reconstruction, allo auto, and the types of processes, neoadjuvant, chemo, and different bones. Superb talk it is. I'm really extremely impressed. Very good, very useful. We'll
thanks,
open the chat box because we already overshot. What we'll do is there are some, if you can see, all the students are requested, sir, even though you covered it, can you repeat the chronology of reading a X-ray in bone
Fine.
tumor?
Yes, sir. So what I can do is I will just again tell in one frame how to read an X-ray. So just to tell is, this is an X-ray of an immature skeleton showing a lesion in epiphysiometaphyseal region of the bone with a periosteal reaction, with a wide zone of transition and a soft tissue mass, most probably suggestive of a malignant bone tumor.
Superb, superb. I'll tell you, if you can tell like this in exam, the examiners will get up and come and fall at your feet.
No, sir. So,
yes. Mark the words he told. Extremely, he told. And Kush must be recording it and probably putting it for the benefit of other people. But please read the way he told. Take my word, after that you make a mistake, nobody is going to penalize you. Superb, Jaimin, very nice. Kush, sir, if you give chemo and then operate, or you operate upfront, which margins in bone tumor should you consider? The margin before starting the chemo, or it has shrunk and now the changed margin? What is acceptable oncologically in musculoskeletal cancer?
So always we follow pre-chemotherapy MRIs. So if you have a pre-chemotherapy MRI and in that one of your compartment is one of your muscle is involved, which has shrunken with the help of chemotherapy, but still you need to take off that muscle which was involved pre-operatively. So in most of the cases, we take a pre-chemo MRI as our margin and not a post-chemotherapy. But there are certain cases where a post-chemotherapy MRI will give you a more idea. If you want to save a critical structure, for example, a major artery, major nerve, or a joint, then in such cases you can follow your post-chemotherapy MRI, and you can know what is the response of your chemotherapy. If you have a very good response to chemotherapy and you want to save a critical structure, then you can follow your post-chemo MRI.
Thank you. There's another question from Ronak Jain. Even though MRI is very useful, which are the conditions where plain X-ray would give some more information which an MRI cannot show in musculoskeletal oncology cases?
So in most of the cases, X-rays, as I have told you, X-ray will give you in most of the cases what tumor you are dealing with, and not an MRI. MRI won't be able to tell you what tumor you are. It's an X-ray which will be able to tell you whether it's a benign tumor or a malignant tumor. So rather than telling that MRI will help, I will tell you that in 99% of cases, if you see an X-ray, you will be able to tell you what tumor you are dealing with, and not an MRI. So if there's a periosteal reaction, if the tumor is in the metaphysis, there is a soft tissue mass, there's a periosteal reaction, you are pretty sure that it's an osteosarcoma or an Ewing sarcoma. Same way, if there is a tumor in the epiphysis of the bone, which has got no periosteal reaction and nothing, you know that you are dealing with a chondroblastoma or a giant cell tumor.
Super, fantastic. You know, all good things has to come to an end. I know that this can go on and on, but beautifully covered. And I also tell students two other most common questions that are asked in exam is the Huan's criteria of response to neoadjuvant chemo in osteosarcoma as graded by pathologists. Read about it, 0, 1, 2. And also read T10 MSKCC regime for osteosarcoma. So thank you very much, Jaimin. Beautiful, fantastic talk. Thanks on behalf of all students and myself. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Over to you to Navneet Singh ji.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jaimin Shah, for the presentation. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Somashekhar, for joining us. And thank you, trainees and faculty members for joining.